Okay, yeah. So last week, last lecture, right? We had a chance to practice the first several labs in the fifth assignment, right? We implemented a server, right? We learned how to communicate, with the server through HTTP requests, right? With and passing data either as parameters, objects, or query, right? We also learned how the server can maintain objects for the client, right? It can maintain a state, right, on the server. It can remember whether you changed the property, right, or if it's an array, whether you pushed a new item or deleted or you updated something in the array. These variables in the server, right, they have a value and they have a life cycle. As long as the server is running, right, the client, the React.js user interface can count, right, on this data being stored semi-permanently, right, on the server. We then discussed asynchronous communication, where our prior examples of integration was that we were just providing hyperlinks, right? That you clicked on the hyperlinks and then this kicked off the server, running some code remotely, right, and manipulating its data structures. But it entailed navigating away from our React application, right? Very rudimentary, right? And a much better solution we introduced the asynchronous communication, where the front end, instead of navigating away from the user interface, stays in the user interface and uses AJAX, right, asynchronous JavaScript XML, right, to send requests behind the scenes, right, without having to navigate away from the user interface. We stay in the user interface, the React.js application, right, and we use libraries such as Axios, right, to behind the scenes, right, send these requests out to the server, right, and then we can intercept those the responses from the server, right, and then update the user interface accordingly. Okay. So anyway, so we had a chance to practice all that. And then created labs accordingly for lab 5, right? We created these hyperlinks that navigated away from the user interface. But then we learned about being able to send a request without leaving the user interface, fetch data from the server, come back, and then display it here in the user interface, right? Same thing, being able to change data structures such as arrays, being able to delete, right, content, and if we refresh, we see that the state on the server is still maintained, right? As long as the server is running, it remembers the state. Obviously, if you restart the server, everything resets and you lose all those changes. All right, so let's now take a look at how we can use these skills, right, to revisit Kanbas, right? Kanbas right now, right, it's all only a user interface application, right? So any changes you make to Kanbas, like for instance, right, if you create a new course, right, and you say add, it adds it. There it is, right? And now, but if you refresh, it's gone, right? Goes back to its initial state, right? So we want these changes instead to be permanent. So instead of just changing the state here in the browser, what we're going to do is that we're going to create APIs, right, web APIs on the server that the user interface can send requests, say, hey, I want to create a new course, right? And just like we looked at the example of creating to-dos in an array, we're going to do similar here, right? We're going to send the server a request, hey, create this course, create, instantiate a new course, push it to the array, right? And then send us back the course that was created. Okay. All right. So this is going to entail us moving a lot of the data management, migrating it from the user interface and migrating it over to the server. So for instance, all this database, right, this collection of JSON files that are currently in the user interface that are used by the React.js application to render this array of courses, all this, right? The data has to live on the server, right? And the server manipulates the data, right? So that it can be more permanent, right? Eventually, obviously, this will be in the database instead, right? But we don't have a database. We're faking a database, right? It's just as an object, right? That collects all these arrays, gives them names of courses and modules and whatnot, but it's not a real database, obviously, right? So in the next lecture, we will introduce a real database, right? And make these changes, really permanent. Okay. All right. So let's start by moving these files over to the Node.js project. Right? So let's create a folder where we can work on our Kanbas implementation on the server, right? And so starting with the database, right? So let's create the courses file here. There it is. So under a new directory, Kanbas, under their database, we'll have courses.js, right? And in there, we're going to put the JavaScript, the JSON data. Let's copy the courses, and we'll just paste it here. Now, notice that the format is a little bit different. Okay. Notice that the name of the file is courses.js. So this is a JavaScript file, not a JSON file. Okay, and the reason is that importing JSON files, right, from Node.js, right, is still an experimental feature, right? That we can absolutely make it work here locally in our machine, but it's not guaranteed to work in our remote server when you deploy this to AWS or Render.js or Heroku. It's not guaranteed to be portable, right? So I'm going to instead use a solution that is portable, right? Is compatible with all Node.js versions. So it's just going to be a regular JavaScript file, and I'm just going to export this. I'm going to say export default like that. Right. So now this array is being exported so that it can be imported from other files. Right. So in a new index file, right, we're going to import from the courses from courses.js. Like that, right? So now the variable courses contains that array that is in the courses.js, right? So let's do the same thing for modules. So I'm going to go to modules, just going to copy this and say I'm going to put it inside of a file, call it modules.js, paste it. And this will be import modules from modules.js. Like that, okay? And let's do the same thing that we did for the in the user interface, right? We'll collect this inside of an object, and we'll export that out, right? So and we have an example of that here, right here, right? And we only have courses and modules. You can work on the rest, assignments, grades, all that, right? You can do that on your own, right? So, but right now, our database just consists of courses and modules, right? This is exactly the same data that we have on the user interface, but we've migrated it here to the server. Pretty good? All right, so next we need to be able to make all this data available to the user interface, right? And we know how to do that. We need to create a set of routes, right, that will expose this data to the user interface, right? And the types of operations we want to achieve, right, are fall in the categories of CRUD operations, right? Creating, reading, updating, and deleting, right? Each one of these data structures or instances of these data structures, right? And we're going to be able to create a course, retrieve a course, or read a course, right? I want to be able to update a course and delete a course, right? Now, this collection of CRUD operations, right, oftentimes is referred to as a RESTful web API, right? First, it's a web API. Well, first it's an API. It's an application programming interface, right? Because these are two programs, right? This is the user interface program interacting with a server program, right? These are two executing processes that are integrating amongst each other, right? Through a programmatic mechanism. So that's why it's an API. Now it's a web API because the way they communicate, right? The way the integration mechanism is through the web, right? It's an HTTP protocol communication, right? Where the server is listening for HTTP requests at port 80, right? And well, in our case, it's port 4000, right? But typically servers, the HTTP servers will listen at port 80. And the user interface is sending Axios requests, right? HTTP requests to the server. So it's a web API, and it's RESTful, right? RESTful is a collection of best practices, naming conventions, right? That of how we are going to implement the API, right? We're not just going to implement the APIs just ad hoc. It's going to have its structure. It's going to have a particular pattern, right? A particular set of rules, right? That if you follow these rules, then we can say that it's a RESTful API. If you just do, I mean, there's an infinite ways of implementing the API, right? But only one way to implement it as a RESTful web API, right? And so we'll introduce that as we go. So let's see. So let's create a directory where we can create the routes, right, for interacting and retrieving courses, right? So let's create a route on the server, right? So in the Kanbas, we'll say new file, routes like this, and let's copy that in there. All right, so let's discuss this for a second. Right, so first idea, one of the ideas of RESTful APIs, right, is that if you are going to retrieve data, right, from the server, right, then you should use the HTTP GET request, right? Pretty simple, right? If you're retrieving data, you should do the GET request, right? So that's one. So the RESTful APIs just follow a particular set of patterns, conventions, right? And one of the conventions is that we use GET for reading or retrieving data. Okay. Another convention is that we refer to we specify that in the URL, right, in the path, right, we only use nouns, right, to refer to the resource that we are retrieving. In our case, the resource consists of a collection of courses, right, or an array of courses. That is a resource, right, that the front end is retrieving, right? Now we call it resource. It's a pretty generic term, but usually it's used in the context of files, right, where a browser application, right, an application running in our browser will look for resources such as images, right, text, HTML content, audio, video, right? So all these are resources that the browser is sending GET requests to retrieve these files, right? These audio files, image files, video files, HTML files, JavaScript files. These are all resources. But resources don't necessarily just have to be files. It could also be data that we can generate on the fly, right? Or that we can compute, right? Through some algorithmic mechanism. So in this case, right, the resource is an array. It's a string. It's basically a string that can be interpreted or formatted as a JSON object or array. Make sense? So the noun here is courses, and it accurately describes what the resource is. These are courses. Also, the convention is that the names of these resources should be plural, right? So in our case, is courses, right? So it is a plural noun, right? So meaning in these URLs, right, in these paths, you will not see a verb, right? So you would not add in the URL things such as create, delete, update, no verbs, right? I know we've used them in the lab, right? And the reason I used it so that I can say now that we don't do that in RESTful APIs. In RESTful Web APIs, no nouns in the URL. Also, another convention is that often we prepend our URLs, right, with some kind of token or identifier that distinguishes this URL from user consumable content, right? This content, this array of courses is not meant to be consumed by a human being. It's not meant to be seen by a human being. It's meant to be accessed programmatically, right, through some process, in our case, the user interface. And it's expecting a string, right, that is not meant to be read by a human being, right? It's meant to be as a communication integration point, right, by the user interface to then render this, right, and compute the user interface using React, right? But this resource itself is not for humans. So we often prepend this URL, right, with some token to identify to make it clear that this is either some kind of integration point between two processes, like an API, an application programming interface, right, and should not be confused with a URL to a file or an image or audio or something that is meant to be consumed by a human being. Right, so that's part of the some conventions, RESTful API conventions. Everybody good? Okay, now that we have the courses, we can load the courses into our app.js, right? So to make it available to the rest of the world, so we're going to import the courses, the routes, right, and then pass it a reference to the Express library, right? So this should give us access now to the courses, right? I should be able to navigate, right, to http://localhost 4000/API/courses, and that should retrieve the courses. So let's try it out. It would be localhost 4000 API courses, and that didn't work. Why is this not working? Is the server not running? Oh, it crashed. Modules. Okay, so let's see, something in the database. So modules. Oh, I never exported the modules. So export default. There we go. All right, we fixed that. Let's try this again. Let's refresh. There we go. We got the courses, right? And again, this data, instead of being a file in the user interface, now it's data that we can go to a server to fetch this data so that we can render in the user interface. Yes? Okay. Let's continue. So now that we have that available, we're going to try and communicate with the server. Now the user interface wants to go fetch this data. Since we're no longer going to use the database in the React.js project, right? We're going to have to go and fetch it from the server. So let's do that. We know that we typically have all our communication with the server in special files we call client files, right? So we're going to create a client file specifically, right, to communicate, right, all about courses, right? We're going to centralize all this, just like in routes, right? In the courses routes, we centralize all the paths, all the routes for get, post, delete, and whatnot, right? In that one JavaScript files here on the user interface side, also, right? We're going to centralize. It's going to be just one module that is sole purpose is to talk to the server about courses, fetch courses, delete courses. So let's do that. So in Kanbas courses in the front end, right, we're going to create a client here, like that. That is going to import the Axios library. It's going to load the URL of where the server is. In our case, it's localhost 4000. It's going to load that up, right? Then it's going to create a constant that has the entire URL for interacting with the courses, which will be, localhost blah 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 4000 API courses. So it's this URL right here, localhost 4000 API courses. That's the URL, and then we're going to create a little function that is going to go fetch the courses or all the courses using the Axios GET request, right? And this is the URL that we're going to be using, this URL right here, that URL. And the data is going to come back. So this returns a response, and I'm extracting from the response the data. Maybe you might find this easier to read if I rewrite it like this, response, and this is just response.data, right? So same thing. I think it was a little more terse and more compact, the other syntax, but this helps reading it. So now we have in the user interface a function that can go fetch the courses from the server. Okay, so let's in the user interface where we need the courses, we need to substitute the current use of the current retrieval of courses. We need to substitute that, replace it with fetching the courses from the server instead, right? So the current implementation of the courses, right, is to retrieve it from the database in the user interface, right? So we have in the Kanbas, right now we are retrieving the database here, and then we are using it to initialize, right, this state variable that contains the courses, right? So we no longer want to do that. We don't want to use the database, right? And that breaks our user interface. So we don't want to use this db.courses anymore. Instead, we want to go fetch the courses from the server. So let's do that, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to create a local file here that is going to go fetch the courses. It's going to use the client that we just built. So we're going to load the client that we just created in the courses client. There it is, as client from, like that. And then here in fetch courses, this is going to be a function that is going to be an asynchronous function because it needs to talk to the server, async. We say const courses equal await client dot fetch all courses, right? And then we can set the courses using the state variable, right? Initialize it with courses, right? And we want to do this on load, right? When the server, when the component first loads, right? So we're going to do a use effect, right? That is going to call our new function. We need to import this. Let's see. To import it. Import use effect from React. Right, and so in here, what we're going to do is that we're going to call that function. We call fetch courses, like that. Okay. Let's see. Use state courses. And so this is going to be empty at first, no initial courses, and this is probably going to have to be an array of any. There we have it, right? Notice that now these are courses that are coming from the server, not from the database. Notice that our database is gone, right? We commented it out. Instead, it's going out to the server, and we can verify that, right? If we look at the inspector, and we can where is the inspector? Huh? Where is the inspector? Huh? Close DevTools. Oh, okay, wait, inspect. Where is putting in my inspector? Is it in this slide? Oh, it's in this window. Just putting it on the other window. There we go. Okay, now it's at the bottom. All right, let me put it back here. There we go. Okay, so here it is, the courses. We can take a look at the network. So we go to the network, right? And if I refresh the screen, oh, wait a minute. Refresh the screen. And notice that it is, the HTTP request is going out to the server. There it is, right? API courses with a GET, and the server is responding with the array of courses, right? And that's what we would expect, right? And then the JavaScript code is taking those courses and setting the courses, initializing this, which then just render it, right? Render it as a grid of courses. Okay, make sense? Everybody good? Right. So we have successfully moved the courses to the server, and then we need to go fetch them and retrieve them. But that's only one of the 4 basic CRUD operations, right? We are reading or retrieving. Right? So that's the R in the CRUD. We still need to be able to create remotely. We can create locally. Right? We can say add, right? These are all instances that we've created locally, right, in the local user interface state variable. But again, these are not permanent, right? When we refresh, everything goes back to its initial state. Okay, all right. So we'll learn about being able to delete, edit, add, right? But through the RESTful web API. Okay, all right. Let's continue. All right, so we know how to retrieve. How about creating new courses, right? So to create new courses, we're going to be using the HTTP post method, right? Again, this is part of the RESTful API set of conventions, right? If you're going to retrieve something, you use HTTP GET, but if you're going to create new data, right, into an existing collection, right, we use post, HTTP post. Okay. Same thing. You use the name of the resource that you are creating. In this case, we are posting a new course, right, to the courses resource, right? And typically you include the data that you are creating embedded inside of the body, right? That is formatted in this case as JSON, right? And then internally you add it to the collection. In our case, it consists of adding it to the array, array of courses that we currently have in the database, right? Eventually, we're going to insert it, right, as a new record, right, into either a table, right, or collection in a database, right? So let me copy that, and so let's go to the server for the courses. There it is. So what it's doing is that it's expecting a post, HTTP post that is going to include, right, in the body, in the HTTP body, it include the courses data, right? It'll include the name of the course, the number, right? All that, right? That we're going to be sending from the user interface, right? Perhaps from having typed the name, right, in the input fields, right? And then in the server, right, we'll create a unique identifier on the server. Eventually, we'll be doing it in the database, right? Whether it's Postgre or MongoDB or whatever. Primary keys typically, right, are generated by the database. In our case, we are faking that, right? We are creating our own ID on the server. Once we have a new instance, right, we're going to add it to our array of courses, and we're going to send back the new instance that we just created. Okay. So yeah, so this implementation matches or the set of rules of conventions, right, that make this a RESTful web API. Okay. All right. So once we have that, we can now go to the user interface, right, and try to post something to this server. So let's do that. So on the client side of in the user interface, right, we're going to add code that's going to post, right, a new course instance to the server, right? So let's do that. So on the client, in the client, right, we using Axios post and to the same API as we used to retrieve, but now we are sending now the data to the server. And so using Axios post to same URL. And notice that here we have a second argument. See that? Argument that we didn't have earlier, right? Because this one, we were retrieving data, whereas in this one, we are sending data over to the server, okay? Which is going to include some of this information, the course name, the description, and the response is going to contain the newly instantiated course, right, that we pushed into the array, right? We're going to have that's what's going to be in the data, and that's what we're returning. Okay. Now that we have that, we can create an event handler on the user interface, right, that passes some data of the course object, right, to the server to be inserted, right? So we're going to refactor our current existing implementation of add new course, right? We're going to refactor it so that instead of creating this on the client in the user interface, is actually going to send this over to the server. The server is going to create it in this in the database in the server. Is going to come back with the actual instance here, the new course, which we're going to add to the array of courses, right? So yeah, so let's re-implement add new course in the user interface. In Kanbas, we have add new course, right? Before, it was instantiated. It was being instantiated in the user interface. It was being added, right? In it was being added to the array of courses in the state variable, right? So we're going to re-implement that. So first of all, it needs to be asynchronous. It's going to be asynchronous again because it's talking to the server, sending requests. We're going to await for the creation of the course on the server, right? This one's going to do the post, or this does the post, and it passes the course instance variable here that we can edit, right, from this form. And then the new course, we're appending it at the end. I'm gonna append it at the beginnings, just so I could see it, like that. I can see it right away when it gets added. And yeah, that's it, right? So let's try it out. Let's see, let's say add. Okay, there it is. So looks like something went wrong with the name, right? It did create it, but it's empty. Let's refresh. Probably it's at the bottom. Yeah, it is. See that? Something wrong with the data that we sent over. Let's make sure that we are sending the data. We can inspect. We can take a look at the network. And we can see what we're sending. We say add. You can see what we're posting. Right in the post, there it is. It's okay, this is the option. Again, this is asking for permission from the server first. Say, what are my options? Can I post? And the server says, yeah, you can post. Right, there it is, you can post. So here's the actual post. And let's see what we're sending. You can see the payload. So we are sending the data correctly. That looks okay. Right, so something must be wrong on the client side, right? And the response looks like it's only adding the ID. That's it, right? Something wrong in the back end. Probably what might be happening is that the data that we're sending over to the server. Let's see. Here's the post, right? The body. We create the ID. Probably what's happening is in here. Yeah, that's what's happening. The server doesn't know what to do with the JSON that we sent it, right? By default, I mean, the server could receive any number of data that we can send it, right? Not necessarily just JSON. We can send it just plain text. We can upload an image, right? We can attach a PDF document. We can send them a movie. We can send it Word document. We can send the server any number of data types, right? Of MIME types, attachment files, right? So it doesn't really know how to handle any one particular one. We need to tell it how to handle certain data that we send it, right? So to do that, on the server, we need to configure. Yeah, there it is. I forgot to do that. We need to configure the server to be able to parse JSON, right? So let's copy that. Make sure that this is after course and before anything else, right? So here, I'm going to put it like that, right? So this is going to be able to parse JSON, right, outside, from the body, and then make it available to everybody else through the request body. Right? So in here, there it is, request body, going to be able to use the JSON that we send it. All right, so let's try it out again. Okay, so let's refresh. And so this is new course 103. We'll say add. There it is, right? So this now should be in the server, right? And it should be permanent. Well, until we restart the server, then it's not permanent. And notice that our URL here, if we refresh, notice that at the bottom, we should see the new course that was added. There it is, see that? And if I create another one, course ABC, we'll say add, there it is. And if I refresh, there it is, right? The new course that we just created. Also in the user interface, if I refresh, before, right, we would be resetting the state in the user interface, right, which blank out these new courses that we created because, there's no way to make it permanent. But if I refresh now, it's going to go fetch the courses from the server, and those two new courses are indeed now permanently in the server, right, until you restart the server. All right, so yeah, so now we can create courses. Let's continue. We would like to be able to delete courses, update courses. So yeah, so we would like to now, let's go creating new courses. Okay, how about deleting a course? Okay, so something from my. Okay, let's copy that. And so in the routes on the server, right? We have create, we have read, we need update and delete, right? So here's delete. So delete, right? Again, as a RESTful API, the convention says that if you're deleting a resource from the server, right, you should use the HTTP delete method, right? Also, again, you should use the plural noun of the resource that you are interacting with, that you're manipulating, retrieving, CRUDing, right? And because delete, typically you mean to delete a single item, right? So again, by convention is that you would include a primary key, right, of the item that you're referring to as part of the URLs. So again, the URL should only include nouns, primary keys, right, and prepending it with some modifier or some token. Okay. So yeah, so with the ID, you pass me the ID of the item that you want to remove. And so I'm going to extract from the parameters, and I'm going to update the array so that it doesn't include that course that we are deleting. So now on the client side, right, we need to be able to send that delete message to the server, right, to remove the course, and we'll need to pass it the ID of the course that we want to remove, right? So in the client, there it is. We're going to delete. We're going to do access.delete, the same course API / courses, and then we're just appending the ID of the course at the end of the URL, right? And now the response, right, it's just going to be a status telling us that we were successful or not, right? In our case, we're going to very optimistically assume that you are deleting a course that actually exists, right? So I'm just going to optimistically return it 200, meaning success, everything good, I did it. In reality, right, I would need to handle edge cases. If you give me an ID of an item that doesn't exist, I'm not going to return 204. I'll return a 404, right, saying that I didn't find the item that you want to delete, right? But yeah, I'll leave that to you. So we have a delete. Now in the user interface, we have the client, and we're going to refactor our delete course that was working on the data structure in the user interface to instead work with the data structure that is being hosted on the remote server. So it's going to send a delete request, right? And here too, I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to assume that it was successful, and if so, right, then I'm going to also remove it from the local array that I have locally on the state variables, right, in the user interface, right? So let's do that in the Kanbas here, right? We have the delete course. So instead of filtering the local instance, right? Well, actually, we're still going to filter it, right? But we also need to tell the server to filter it, right? By giving it the client like this, delete course, and this is a sync, like that. So we're deleting it from both places. We're telling the server, hey, server, remove this item. And if it's successful, right, I'm also going to remove it from the local array in the user interface, right, to maintain it in sync, right? So, so let's try it out. Let's see. So I refresh. All right, and I should be able to delete. Let's see. There we go. So we can delete. We can delete a whole bunch of these. Delete. That, right? So I deleted a whole bunch of them, right? Oh, let's go back. And notice that the operations is permanent, right? Meaning if I refresh, it only shows the surviving courses that I've not deleted, right? And And so if I remove these two, right, I only get 4. If I refresh, I still just have those 4. Yep. Okay. What about updating a course, right? So updating a course, by convention, again, the convention is that we use post to create, get to retrieve, delete for removing, right? And use put for updating items, right? So let's do that in the server, right? Let's add a put there that again is going to embed the ID of the item that we're updating, right, as part of the parameter, right, in the path, and then the body is going to contain the changes. What is it that we want to replace? Right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to iterate over the courses. Right? I'm going to rebuild the array of courses with the old courses, but if it's the course that we're updating because I passed it to you as an ID, then I'm going to replace it with the old courses, but overriding whatever fields might have changed, right, from the user interface, right? And we override it, we update it, right? And then as we rebuild the array of courses. And again, we're optimistic, we're assuming that this succeeded, right? And we're coming back with a success, right? Now in the client, right, we're going to add an update course that is going to send the put command, right, to the server. So this is so there it is. So create, create. I guess I should put them in order. So create, read, update, and delete, right? So delete, we've done. So update, you're gonna pass me the course that we're updating, right? And I'm gonna use the ID of the course, as the primary key of the course that I am updating, I'm putting, right? And then the actual course will be, right, the all the changes and all the updates, right? Yeah, so in the client, right, in the user interface, we are going to keep the same logic that we are using already for updating the user interface. We just have to make sure that the server also knows that we are removing this, so to make it permanent, right? So in the update course, right, we're going to client update the course object. And so that should work as well. So for instance, if we our dynamics, if we edit this, right, it's going to set it here, and we should be able to 2, 3, 4, and then let's update this too, like that. So update goes out to the server, makes the changes, right, gives back to a success, and then we update it accordingly in the user interface. But if we refresh, the change is not permanent. Why is it not permanent? What's going on? Let's see. Let's see what are we sending for the update. Network. Let's edit this one. Spacecraft design. 1, 2, 3, 4. Update. Okay. Ooh, undefined. That's important. It looks like we don't have the ID for some reason. Probably I misspelled the primary key in the client. Okay, yeah. So it's probably underscore ID, right? Let's confirm. Let's see what we're sending. Options here. We can see the payload. Yeah, it's underscore ID. It's wrong. Okay. So let's refresh. And let's try it again. So let's organic chemistry edit. Let's change this to be 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. Let's clear this. And then update. And so we're sending, see the ID at the end, right? And the response is, ooh, we didn't get a response. Oh, that's the option, sorry. Put payload, there it is. The changes, notice that the name has changed and the description has changed and the response comes back. Ooh, we don't get a response. Okay, that's troubling. Let's see. Let's refresh. And that didn't work either. Let's see. Let's see what's happening on the server. Put course body, blah, 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 blah. Put API courses in the ID. So we are putting now. Let's see. So edit changes here, update. So we pre-flight. This is what we sent, like that. RS-102 courses and the changes. So that is correct, but we never get back a response. Okay. Let's see on the server. Oh, we sent back a status 204. That's correct. API courses ID. Is that correct? Header. API courses ID 4000. Yeah, it looks right. All right, so let's make sure that we are getting in here. Let's put here console log ID and course. See if we get there. Let's try it out. Where is it here? Update. Let's see what the server. Okay, so the server. Okay, we have the ID. There it is, underscore ID, RS-102. And so we're mapping through the course, courses map. We're iterating over it. If the ID is equal to the ID, which is RS-102, if this is equal to ID, then override this. The object is coming back as course, that's correct. And do we make it here? Okay. With the changes, do we have the changes here? Yeah, yeah, we have the changes on the name here, right? The 3. Yep. Let's try it again. Update. So we get to that. Did it change it? RS. Okay, so this is the object, RS-102. Oh, it didn't change. Oh, it did change it. There it is. It did change it. So why are we not getting the response? Let me see on the client. We have the update. Await async response.data. Looks right. Response.data. Axios put. Kanbas update. Await update course. Client update course. Update course. Put response. Course ID. So, but it is changing it, isn't it? Is it changing it? It is changing. It is changing. It is changing. Then why don't I see the change here? Oh, it is? Huh? Wait, it is working. Okay, let's try it again. Run revulsion. Update. Oh, okay. And if I refresh? Okay. I must have just not restarted something. Okay, good. It's working. Yeah, so that was the implementing the various CRUD operations, right, for the courses, right? So we want to be able to do the same thing now for modules, right?